The first thing I want to say is that what we saw happen to Alex Padilla today in California was shocking and chilling and not the America that I know. And I want you to stop and think for a minute. This was a U.S. Senator, but that shouldn't matter. Nobody, no American should be treated that way simply for exercising their right to question their public officials. I know Alex Padilla. He's a gentle, non-violent, non-aggressive kind of guy. And to see what we all saw was truly shocking. And on the way up today, as I was coming into Portland, I thought about what if this were me and what if this were Portland? What if we had several thousand troops here in Portland and the chief of police didn't ask for them, the governor didn't ask for them, the mayor didn't ask for them, but they were here anyway? I'd want answers. And that's what Alex Padilla was trying to do. He was exercising his authority and his responsibility as a public official representing California to get answers to what's going on out there. He's also from Los Angeles, and so he has a special feel for that community. I'd also like to touch on the whole issue of the troops and the National Guard and the Marines in Los Angeles. This country has a long-term basic principle that we don't involve the armed services in law enforcement. That goes back to the very founding of the country. And it's something that's been a principle for as long as anyone can remember. Therefore, when troops are deployed, when the National Guard is federalized in the country, it's, number one, very unusual, and number two, it's almost invariably at the request of the local authorities, the mayor, and the governor. And again, I tried to think of how I would feel coming into Portland today if the governor had said we don't need the troops, if the chief of police in Portland said we don't need them, if the mayor said we don't need them, but there were several thousand troops here. I'd want answers too. We should be using force as a last resort, not as a first resort. Clearly, violence is never accepted, is never acceptable. Vandalism is never acceptable. Riots are never acceptable. But peaceful protest is part of what America is. It's actually literally in the First Amendment, the right of the people to peacefully petition their government for redress of grievances. So the real question in Los Angeles is, was the federal call-up necessary? And I start with the local officials, particularly the chief of police, who said yesterday that it wasn't necessary, that they had it under control. This is a very limited area in a very large city, one of the largest cities in the country. And to have forced in a federalized National Guard and the U.S. Marines, which is unprecedented in my experience. I've never heard of the Marines being called out for any kind of domestic disturbance in my lifetime. It may have happened somewhere at some time, but I've never heard of it. And the concern that was raised by the governor and the mayor was that the presence of these federal forces would only inflame the situation, would only create more pressure toward violence and the kind of protest that isn't allowed under our laws. So I think, again, we need to think about the picture of this gentle man pushed down onto the floor, handcuffed, not that he was a U.S. Senator, but that he was a citizen of the United States. He wanted to ask questions of a public official. He wanted to ask questions of a public official that needed answers. And to me, as I said, it was shocking and chilling and not the America I know. Thank you.
Are you afraid that this is just becoming more of a norm? These things are just going to keep happening?
I am. I do. I absolutely am concerned about that because, as I mentioned, force seems to become the first resort instead of the last resort, and that's very dangerous. And deployment of troops in our country, within our country for law enforcement, A, is against federal law, and B, is against every tradition that this country stands for. They should be used very sparingly and only in the most extreme circumstances. And the way to check that box is, do the local authorities say they need them? If they say they don't need them, then that ought to be a big hint that it's not necessary. They would call for help if they needed it. And it only, as I mentioned, can, not only, I shouldn't say only, but it has the potential to actually increase violence and inflame the situation.
Do you and your colleagues have an avenue to get these troops out of there?
Well, the state of California has filed a lawsuit, which is being heard as we speak in California this afternoon, questioning the legality of the deployment. I'll leave it to the courts to make that decision. Of course, the Congress does have oversight responsibility, which is one of the things Senator Padilla was exercising, to see about how federal funds are being allocated. I should have mentioned that the figure that I saw in the last 2 days from federal officials is that the cost of this deployment is over $130 million. $130 million for what appears to be an unnecessary deployment and a show of force. I think that's something that we should be thinking about as well.
Are you also afraid that the president is no longer interested in listening to what any rules are, or adhering to what any rules or laws are?
I don't really want to go that far. Let's keep it on this topic, okay?
What consequences would you like to see as a result of what happened to your colleague?
Well, I think we need to have a full examination of what exactly happened. What did Alex do? What did he say? And did it justify in any remote way the response? And I think there will be inquiry. I hope that my colleagues in the majority in the Senate will join all of us in following up on what this represents. And again, I'm not standing here just because this was a U.S. senator. This shouldn't happen to anybody under those circumstances. It was a very chilling video. Senator Lisa Murkowski, I think, said it was shocking at all levels and not the America she knows. And I hope her colleagues feel the same way, which will enable us to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. And I think we need to get to the bottom of the deployment of the National Guard and the Marines to understand, was it necessary? And if it wasn't, how do we prevent that from happening again?
Why did you want to call this today, though, given you don't do having a presser here, like for one event, and it was Senator Padilla that we're focused on,
Yeah.
like, is that a sign that you think it is?
I think this is a very serious matter.
Yeah. Do you think Kristi Noem could face punishment? Like, I'm just trying to get at what could
Well, she could have defused the situation simply by saying, Senator, I'll answer your questions in a few minutes if you'll let me finish my statement. My impression is that didn't happen. He said he wanted to ask questions, and immediately these fellows grabbed him, pulled him out in the hallway. And even more chilling, if you've watched the video at the end, you hear a voice saying, "No video here," where he's on the ground being handcuffed, and then suddenly somebody comes up in front of the, and it was a staff member of Senator Padilla was taking the picture. They said, "No video here." That bothers me. The whole image of federal law enforcement with masks on, I find just not consistent with the America that I know.
Senator, as you mentioned, it's early times knowing exactly what happened with Senator Padilla. But what would you say to your Republican colleagues who are already saying that he should have been more polite, or that this isn't the appropriate way to exercise his oversight responsibility?
The First Amendment doesn't say free polite speech. The protection is not for politeness, it's for speech. It's for petitioning the government for the redress of grievances. It's for confronting power in a direct, unequivocal way. So I don't think that's sufficient. If he had run up to the stage and grabbed the microphone and knocked her over, that would be a different, I think that would be a different situation, but it's not what I saw.
One of the things that was said was that he lunged towards her. Did you see any evidence of that?
I did not see that.
Have you spoken to him?
And that's inconsistent with the guy I know.
Have you spoken to?
I have not. Apparently he's been released, and he's made a statement outside of the federal building, but I haven't seen it, and I haven't been in touch with him. I've just this minute got off an airplane.
Yeah, of course. And you just touched upon, this potentially happening in Maine or fears of it happening in Maine. How does everything that's been happening in the past week in LA kind of change your perspective to what we could potentially see here in Maine?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm disturbed. Well, I don't know. I wasn't on the ground in Los Angeles. I don't know exactly what happened on those nights. But I start with a presumption against federal troops unless necessary. And the question is, were they necessary? And to me, the first way to determine whether they were necessary is to ask the local officials, particularly the chief of police and the mayor. And if they say, we've got it under control, then I think we can save the taxpayers money and also save inflaming the situation. And the president has said, in effect, this could happen anywhere in the country. And I find that very disturbing. We don't use the military to enforce the law. That's the law in this country, and it's also deeply embedded in our tradition. The military is non-political and should not be involved in internal matters in this country unless it's absolutely necessary. I've called out the National Guard. When I was governor, I called out the National Guard in Maine. I think it was the largest call-up of the National Guard in history during the ice storm. Everybody knew that was an emergency that justified and needed the National Guard's support, and there was no question about it. But to have the president on his own initiative call out the National Guard over the objection of the governor and the mayor and the chief of police, I think that's getting us into very dangerous territory. I'm supposed to be downtown for a...
As a senator yourself, how does this raise concern over the legal protections you and other government officials have under this current administration?
Ask again, I'm sorry.
As a senator yourself, how does this raise concern over the legal protections that you and other government officials have under this current administration?
Well, it's concerning. I mean, again, I don't think we should focus so much on this being a senator. I think we should focus on this being an American. But it is concerning that one thing I saw from the tape is he identified himself. He said, "I'm Senator Alex Padilla," and then he had his hands up, and he was forced out of the room onto the ground. It was very chilling to me to see a guy with FBI on his back handcuffing a United States senator. Okay, got to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.